Dear batch 23 students, we have already started with the disease part for periodontal diseases. So today we will continue with the gingival diseases in childhood and acute gingival diseases. We will start with gingival diseases in childhood. The learning outcomes are: list 3 common gingival diseases in childhood, explain the various gingival diseases in childhood, differentiate normal gingiva from gingival diseases in childhood, and recognize various clinical features of gingivitis. So basically, what is the difference between a primary dentition and permanent dentition when compared to gingiva and periodontium? The periodontium of primary dentition, how it differs from adult. Basically, the adult gingiva will be the marginal gingiva will be knife edged in shape. The attached gingiva will be more stippling and coral pink in color. The papillary gingiva is pyramidal in shape, and in the posterior region it will be having a tent like or a valley like shape, which is called a skull, and the gingival sulcus will be around 0 to 3 millimeters in adults, whereas in children's the marginal gingiva will be more rounded, thick and rolled compared to adult gingiva. Adult gingiva, it will be a knife edged gingiva, whereas in children's it will be more rounded. The attached gingiva will be wider compared to adult, and it will be having less tippling. The papilla is, there will not be any interdental caul formation. Valley like depression will not be formed in primary dentition, whereas in permanent dentition you will see a pyramidal shaped interdental papilla and caul formation in the posterior. Normally the gingival sulcus of a primary dentition will be around 1.4 to 2.1 millimeter, whereas in adults it will be around 2 to 3 millimeters. So coming on to the periodontium of the primary dentition, the periodontium of the primary dentition, it is more stippled. The stippling of dentition start appearing after the age of 3. So the junctional epithelium is thicker in primary dentition compared to permanent dentition. When it goes to radiographically, you can see a lamina dura and periodontal ligament space, which are prominent in primary dentition compared to a permanent dentition. The marrow space of the bone are larger, and the crust of the interdental bone septa are flat with bony crest within 1 to 2 mm from the cemento-enamel junction in primary dentition is seen. So the periodontal changes associated with normal development, what are all the periodontal changes you will see during the normal development of the tooth, or it's during tooth eruption or during tooth exfoliation. So during tooth eruption, what are all the normal periodontal changes you will see? When there is a tooth eruption, you will most frequently see a eruption cyst, where a fluid filled or a blood filled gingival enlargement, which is bluish to deep red in color, is seen on the gingival margin or in the bulbous gingiva before the eruption of the tooth, which may most frequent times it change into a cyst, but after the tooth erupt into the oral cavity, it resolves by itself. Other possible changes you will see is ankylosis of teeth. The ankylosis is most commonly due to an external trauma during tooth extraction, or occlusal trauma, or due to some developmental disturbance. There may be some ankylosis of teeth can happen. Exfoliation: when a primary tooth exfoliate, the depth of the gingival sulcus increases, the junctional epithelium migrates downwards for the resorbing root and exfoliation of the tooth. So there will be malocclusion and trauma to the periodontal structures. Plaque and food removal may be difficult. The gingival enlargement and discoloration occurs, and occasionally there will be ulcerations and formation of deep pocket or a pseudo pocket can be seen during the primary tooth exfoliation. Coming on to the diseases, the gingival diseases of childhood. What are all the gingival diseases you will see during childhood? One is plaque induced and non-plaque induced gingival diseases. Most frequently you will see plaque induced gingival diseases, that too most frequently gingivitis. So the plaque induced gingival diseases are gingivitis, eruption gingivitis, puberty gingivitis, drug induced gingival enlargement, gingival changes related to orthodontic appliances or due to mouth breathing habit. These are all the plaque-induced gingival diseases you will see. Most frequently, it will be only gingivitis. The non-plaque induced gingival lesions are primary herpetic gingivostomatitis and candidiasis, which are not common. So we'll see what is gingivitis. What is the type of gingivitis you will see in childhood. The clinical appearance will be, it will be seen first on the marginal gingiva. They may be occasionally extended to the attached gingiva. The gingival tissue becomes red and swollen and bleeds easily, either by probing or during brushing. So the most frequently seen disease in childhood is gingivitis. Other than gingivitis is primary herpetic gingivostomatitis. These are the most commonly seen in childhood, the gingiva disease. The primary herpetic gingivostomatitis, the clinical presentation will be, there will be symptoms which develop suddenly, characterized by red gingival tissue, headache, fever, malaise, irritability, pain while intaking food, and food which are containing acid contents. The characteristic oral findings is the presence of white or yellowish liquid filled vesicles which ruptures within few days and forms a painful ulcer. These ulcers are 1 to 3 millimeter in diameter, which are covered with a white grayish membrane with a circumscribed area of inflammation. Usually it resolves within 7 to 14 days. The disease resolves within 7 to 14 days. Periodontal disease, mostly uncommon in child. If it is there, most frequently it is seen after the age of 12. The incidence of periodontal disease is after the age of 12, not before the age of 12, and most frequently less than the age of 12 you will see only gingivitis. Gingivitis is considered to be nearly universal in children over the age of 7 years up to 12 years. Other disease is aggressive periodontitis. Again, it is seen more commonly after the age of 12, not before the age of 12. Other than this gingivitis and periodontitis, you can see some gingival manifestations due to systemic disease in children. For example, endocrine disorders. Patient with diabetic can show some gingival manifestations. If the patient is having a diabetic or a leukemia or a leukocyte disorders or congenital anomalies, there may be some manifestations in the gingiva for these systemic diseases. So to summarize gingival diseases in childhood, the periodontium in the primary dentition is different compared to the permanent dentition. So the normal development can result in changes in the periodontium. The most frequently seen disease is a plaque-induced gingivitis. It is very common in children, although it may be less intense compared to adult. With the exception of localized aggressive periodontitis, children rarely show signs of periodontitis. Some systemic disorders commonly associated with periodontal disease present initially during childhood. So the recommendations regarding home plaque control routines should be individualized according to the patient. So the next topic is acute gingival diseases. So the learning outcomes for acute gingival diseases are: name 5 acute conditions of the gingiva and periodontal disease, identify the etiology of acute gingival diseases, describe the clinical features of acute gingival diseases, and categorize the different treatment procedures for acute gingival conditions. To start with, we'll start with abscesses of periodontium. So abscess of periodontium, basically the abscess of periodontium is classified into gingival abscess, periodontal abscess, and pericoronal abscess. Gingival abscess, when it involves only marginal gingiva and interdental papilla, not involving the attached gingiva. Once it starts involving the attached gingiva, then it is called as periodontal abscess, a localized infection which involves attached gingiva, and there will be destruction of periodontal ligament and alveolar bone. Whereas pericoronal abscess is a localized infection seen in a partially erupted tooth, most commonly seen in the third mandibular molars, which is partially erupted. So we'll see one by one. So gingival abscess, the etiology is acute inflammatory response due to a foreign substance forced into the gingiva. So the clinical features will be a localized swelling on the marginal gingiva or a papilla, a red, smooth, shiny surface. It may be painful and appears pointed. There will be purulent exudate. No previous history of periodontal disease. So the treatment is eliminate the foreign object. The abscess will resolve by itself within 24 to 48 hours. So you eliminate the foreign object, drain the abscess, and the disease will resolve within 48 hours. Next is periodontal abscess. Periodontal abscess usually there will be a pre-existing chronic periodontal disease with pocket. Where the most frequently the reason for abscess formation is the factors associated with the abscess formation development is occlusion of the pocket orifice, where the coronal part of the pocket has been occluded, so the bacteria is stay in that place for a longer time and induce abscess formation. Other reasons may be furcation involvement, where it is very difficult for the patient to manage and remove all the local factors and bacteria in the furcation region, which results in formation of abscess. Or in case of patient with systemic antibiotic therapy, which results in resistant bacteria growing inside the oral cavity. Or patients with diabetes mellitus. Most frequently patients with diabetes mellitus, it is a sixth cause for periodontal disease. The periodontal disease is one of the risk factor for diabetes mellitus. So diabetes mellitus patients will be having multiple periodontal abscess. So the clinical features for a periodontal abscess will be smooth, shiny swelling on the gingiva, painful, tender on palpation. There will be purulent exudate. There will be increased probing depth, mobility, and percussion sensitivity. Usually the tooth will be vital. So how to differentiate a periodontal abscess from pericoronal or periapical abscess? So basically the periodontal abscess, the difference between periodontal abscess and periapical abscess is periodontal abscess, there is no caries. The abscess is formed due to pocket. And in periapical abscess, the abscess is due to a carious lesion which involves the pulp. So the periapical region is infected. So the difference is in periodontal abscess, the tooth will be vital. There will not be any carious lesion. The patient will be having a periodontal pocket. There will be a radiolucency on the lateral aspect of the tooth. There will be mobility. There will be a difference in percussion sensitivity, which is variable. There may be sensitive, there may not be sensitive, and the sinus tract will be seen in the keratinized gingiva. Whereas in periapical abscess, the tooth will be non-vital. There will be a carious lesion which involves the pulp, and there will be a periapical lesion. So there will not be any pocket if it is purely a periapical abscess. The radiographs can show an apical radiolucency with no or minimal tooth mobility. Percussion sensitivity will be always present, and sinus tract opening is always seen in the alveolar mucosa. So what is the treatment for periodontal abscess? Basically drain the abscess. If you establish a drainage of the abscess should come down. So the basic idea is either drain the abscess via the sulcus. If you couldn't able to establish a drainage via sulcus, then do an incision and drainage to remove the abscess. Other treatments you can do limited occlusal adjustment if there is a secondary trauma from occlusion which results in abscess formation. Once you relieve the trauma, you can decrease the activity of the infection, or you can give an antimicrobial therapy. Most frequently antimicrobial therapy is not required for regular patients. It is required only if there is fever, malaise, lymphadenopathy, or if you cannot able to obtain an drainage. Then you think about antimicrobial therapy. Otherwise, if you can able to achieve a drainage, you don't need to give any antibiotics, and a painkiller is more than enough. After drainage, the abscess will subside by itself. but after the active symptoms you have to evaluate the periodontal status for the patient. Pericoronal abscess, the clinical features, most frequently the operculum which is covering the partially erupted tooth will be inflamed. There will be localized red swollen tissue areas with painful areas which are painful to touch. The tissue trauma can happen due to the opposing tooth. There will be purulent exudate. Sometimes the patient will be having some trismus, lymphadenopathy and fever. Treatment option again, drainage of the abscess. Once you drain the abscess, once the acute symptoms resolves, try to recontour the tissue so that there will not be any food accumulation happens in the region, either by operculectomy or gingivectomy in the region, so that the food accumulation will not happen and the patient can able to maintain the region. If you could not able to maintain a oral hygiene or you cannot able to incise the tissue due to bone in the distal aspect, or the tooth cannot able to erupt completely into the oral cavity over a period of time, then you have to think about extraction of that partially erupted tooth. Next disease is necrotizing periodontal diseases. The necrotizing periodontal diseases, it is no more called as an acute disease because it is going to be there for a longer time. It is not happening on a single day, so the term acute has been removed from the year 2000 after the AAP, American Academy of Periodontology 1999 classification. The term acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis has been removed and it is called as necrotizing periodontal disease. Basically it is classified into necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis and necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis. So gingivitis, again the involvement is restricted only to the interdental papilla when it is gingivitis. Once it becomes periodontitis, the involvement extends to the attached gingiva and more deeper into the interdental gingiva. So what are all the we'll see the other names for necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. It is also called as Vincent disease or trench mouth disease or acute necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. So the necrosis is mostly limited to the gingival tissue. The estimated prevalence is only 0.6% in general population. Most frequently seen in younger adults with a mean age of 23 years and more commonly seen in Caucasians than other species. The bacterial flora which is responsible for gingivitis is spirochetal organisms along with Prevotella intermedia and Fusobacterium nucleatum. So what are all the clinical features of necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis? There will be gingival necrosis, especially on the tip of interdental papilla. There will be gingival bleeding, pain, fetid breath and pseudomembrane formation. Mostly the predisposing factors will be emotional stress, poor oral hygiene, smoking, poor nutrition or immunosuppression. So most commonly these type of diseases is seen in patients with immunocompromised disease like HIV positive patients. So if you see some necrotizing ulcerative disease, you have to think about HIV positive or a patient with an immunocompromised state before you start treating the patient. You have to take a proper medical history about the immunocompromised state before you start treating such patients. Coming on to necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis, the clinical features is same like ANAC but with an more extension. It is like next level of necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. If the necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis is not treated and left over, it moves on to necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis. If necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis is not treated, it keeps moving until the stage of noma, where it involves the cheek. The necrosis involves the cheeks. So the clinical features will be same like necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis, but with severe deep aching pain, very rapid rate of bone destructions, and there will not be any pocket formation. Why there is no pocket formation? Because it is a necrotizing disease. The junctional epithelium is necrosed. Once the necrosis happens to the junctional epithelium, it will not migrate apically. So it is just erode the tissue rather than migrate apically. Only if the junctional epithelium migrates apically, you will see pocket formation. When there is no junctional epithelium or junctional epithelium does not migrate, then there will not be any pocket. So in necrotizing disease, due to necrosis, the junctional epithelium is lost. So there will not be any formation of pocket in necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis. So coming on to treatment, local debridement, oral hygiene instructions, oral rinses and pain control are the most basic treatment for necrotizing ulcerative periodontitis. Most of the time the necrotizing disease will come to control once you do a proper local debridement. In most cases, a proper root planing and scaling will resolve the disease. If the patient is having a pain, then you have to administer anesthesia to perform scaling and root planing. It is always advised to do a manual scaling rather than using an ultrasonic instrumentation, mainly due to the risk of transmission of infection. If it is an immunocompromised patient, then you have to definitely avoid using ultrasonic instrumentation to prevent any risk of transmission of disease. Followed by oral hygiene instructions and oral rinses. Most frequently, either chlorhexidine gluconate twice daily or a mouthwash with hydrogen peroxide and combination of water with hydrogen peroxide, or povidone iodine can be given for mouthwash so that the patient can resolve the disease faster. Antibiotics, you can think about a broad spectrum antibiotic if it required. Most frequently the primary treatment is more than enough to resolve the disease. You don't need to move on to antibiotic prophylaxis or antibiotic therapy. If the patient is immunocompromised, then you have to think about antibiotic therapy, but avoid using a broad spectrum antibiotic in patients with AIDS or HIV positive patients. Next is gingival diseases of viral origin. What are all the acute gingival diseases you can see due to viral origin? We already seen in gingival diseases in childhood the primary herpetic gingivostomatitis, which is caused due to herpes simplex virus. So the gingival diseases of viral origin, most commonly the primary herpetic gingivostomatitis and recurrent herpes disease. So acute manifestations of viral infections of the oral cavity characterized by redness and multiple vesicles that easily ruptures to form painful ulcers affecting the gingiva. So what are the clinical features of primary herpetic gingivostomatitis? It is classically due to the herpes simplex virus type 1. So it mostly seen in younger children, and 90% of the primary oral infections are asymptomatic. Most frequently the clinical features what is seen is there will be painful severe gingivitis with ulceration, edema and stomatitis, vesicle ruptures and forms ulcers. Fevers, lymphadenopathy are the classical features of primary herpetic gingivostomatitis. The lesion usually resolves within 7 to 14 days. So the treatment is palliative treatment. You have to give a antipyretic to relieve pain. That is more than enough. If the patient takes bed rest and a proper nutrition will result a good healing for the patient. Usually the disease will last only for 7 to 14 days and it resolves by itself. So there is no need of any active therapy in case of primary herpetic gingivostomatitis. A recurrent oral herpes, it is a recurrence of the primary herpes virus type 1. It is recurrent infection of the primary. So it is most frequently seen in patients who have been already infected with primary herpetic gingivostomatitis. So the recurrent infection is seen in 20 to 40% of those with primary infection infected with herpes labialis. So the recurrent infection is less severe compared to primary. The primary infection will be more severe compared to the recurrent infections. So the clinical features will be prodromal syndromes. Lesions start as a vesicle and ruptures into an ulcer. A cluster of small painful ulcers on the attached gingiva or lip is characterized, can cause postoperative pain if there is a dental treatment is done. So it is advised not to do any dental treatment during active disease state. So what are all the reasons for viral reactivation? Why the virus get reactivated? Maybe more reasons for viral reactivations like fever, systemic infection, ultraviolet light, or a stress, immune system changes, trauma, or some other any unidentified cause. Anything can reactivate the virus. So once the virus is reactivated, it will show some symptoms and it resolves within 7 to 14 days. So the treatment is again palliative treatment. There is no need of any active treatment unless until the patient is immunocompromised. So the next set of acute disease is recurrent aphthous stomatitis. It is also called as canker sore. The etiology of the recurrent aphthous stomatitis is unknown. Most frequently it affects the mobile tissue rather than the non-mobile tissue, the gingiva. Most frequently it is seen on buccal mucosa and lips rather than gingiva, attached gingiva or in the marginal gingiva. There are three forms of recurrent aphthous: minor, major and herpetiformis. The clinical features of minor aphthous are more common. Small shallow ulcerations with slightly raised erythematous border, central area covered with yellowish white pseudomembrane, and the ulcer will heal within 10 to 14 days without any scarring. Whereas the major aphthous is larger in size, usually take longer period for healing, and it frequently heals with scarring. So the major aphthous will be 0.5 centimeter, usually larger than 0.5 centimeter in diameter, and it lasts for a longer time and it frequently heals with scarring, whereas minor and herpetiformis heals without scarring. So the herpetiformis, it is a small discrete crops of multiple ulcers. It just resembles like an herpetic stomatitis, so it is named as herpetiformis ulcer. The lesion is similar to herpetic stomatitis, but there will not be any vesicles. It's only an ulcer and it heals within 7 to 10 days without any scarring. So what may be the predisposing factor? Again, the predisposing factor may be trauma, stress, hypersensitivity to food, or previous viral infection, or the patient with nutritional deficiency. So treatment, what treatment we are going to give? Again a palliative treatment, pain relief. Pain relief is the most important treatment in aphthous stomatitis. Since the lesion will heal within 7 to 14 days, there is no need of any active therapy needed for the patients. It's only the pain relief from the ulcer areas. You can give any other topical anesthetic rinse or adequate fluid and nutrition, or a oral rinse with chlorhexidine can help the patient in relieving the disease faster. The final part of the topic is allergic reactions. The next part of acute infection may be due to allergic reactions, but intraoral occurrence of allergic reactions is more uncommon. You need a higher concentrations of allergens when compared to skin allergies. Skin allergens will be less allergens is required to cause a skin allergy compared to oral mucosal allergic reactions. The most frequently seen allergens which are causing allergic reactions are dental restorations, toothpaste and mouthwashes, and food. Dental restorations like mercury, nickel, gold or chromium can cause allergic reactions to the patient, or a component in the toothpaste or a preservative added in the toothpaste can cause an allergic reaction to the patient in the oral cavity. Some patients are even allergic to foods like peanuts, red pepper, which can be manifested in the oral cavity. The clinical features of allergic reaction will be variable because it depends on the cause. The clinical feature will vary. So sometimes it may resembles like a oral lichen planus, or it may result in an ulcerated lesion or a fried red erythematous gingivitis lesion. So the treatment is, you need to take a comprehensive history and interview with the patient regarding the allergen. Once you know the allergen, eliminate the allergen, the healing will happen by itself. You don't need to give any active therapy. You have to identify the allergen and remove the allergen. The allergic reactions will resolve by itself. So to summarize, today we have seen the gingival diseases of childhood, whereas gingivitis and viral induced gingival diseases in childhood, and we have seen acute gingival diseases which includes abscesses of periodontium, necrotizing periodontal disease, gingival diseases of viral origin, recurrent aphthous ulcer, and allergic reactions. So with this we have finished the topic on acute gingival diseases and gingival diseases in childhood. Thank you.